Howdy, and welcome to the Breakaway podcast. Thanks for listening. Breakaway is a Bible study recorded on the campus of Texas A&M. For more information about Breakaway, visit breakawayministries.org. The following message is part of our series, Sync, by Director Timothy Atik. We hope you enjoy the message.
Well, I want to start tonight by just simply identifying for us several things that we definitely do not value in life. I just want to point out things that we clearly have no interest in and we find no value in at all. And there's no better place to start than with Chick-fil-A, right? I mean, nobody here cares about Chick-fil-A, right? Nobody here eats Chick-fil-A 3 times a week. I mean, right here in this bag, I have a number 1 with no pickles. Whoever orders the pickles on the number 1, right? It's a number 1, it's fresh. I've got 2 Chick-fil-A sauce, but no one would want that because no one cares about Chick-fil-A, right? I mean, it's just we don't need it. We don't want it. We don't value it at all. Am I right? And then there's Lululemon, right? Like nobody cares about Lululemon. No one is sitting there saying, Lululemon is the best thing that has ever touched my body. No one says that creepy statement. No one sees this little round circle with the funky looking A in it and feels a little bit more confident when it shows up halfway down your calf. No one walks around campus just feeling a little bit better about themselves, knowing that that's kind of the case. Am I right? So I guess we can just take these and we can rip up these Lululemon shorts because we don't value Lululemon. Who cares? Got an engagement ring right here. Diamond and all. Nobody here cares about romantic love, right? Nobody here is setting their heart on a ring by spring, or let's get honest, a ring by Christmas, or let's get real, a ring by next week. Nobody cares about getting one of these things. No one thinks about their own candle pass where the candle would come to them and girls would gather around and you would share your story and assume that your story is the best story that anyone's ever heard before. Nobody cares about romantic love. No one wants to know who the one really is. And then you've got books and studying. I think those are self-explanatory for sure. Yeah, that's just... There's that. And then there's self-image. You know, we've got social media on our phones. No one cares about how you appear on social media. I sure as heck don't give a rip about how I appear on social media. Like, here's a picture of me that I plan to post on social media because I don't care about how I come across on social media. So it's actually going to be posted on my profile at Timothy Atik on Instagram. It's posted now. You can go see it if you want because nobody cares about their self-image. Nobody cares about their appearance, and nobody cares about how people interact with them on social media. No one refreshes their screen every 2 minutes. Nobody takes stock in that one little red dot showing up underneath the heart on Instagram, indicating that more people have liked you or started to follow you. Nobody values that at all. How dumb is this, right? Of course we value these things. I mean, it's a sin to throw Chick-fil-A on the ground. I am so sorry. God forgive me please tell Dan Cathy my apologies and call him to open up Chick-fil-A on Sundays, because we really do value Chick-fil-A. And Lululemon, it is pretty great, and their clothes do feel pretty good. And we do value Lululemon. And if it's not Lulu for you, maybe it's Nike, or maybe it's just like Crush Party t-shirts, or if fashion isn't your thing, maybe it's some other thing, whether it's your phone or your computer or your gaming system. We value stuff. And then it's somewhere in here. Yeah, this ring here. Yeah, we value romantic love. Of course we care about relationships. I mean, there's some dudes in here who are doing the whole bros before those who are not bros, and that's kind of your thing. And you're going to be a bachelor to the rapture, and way to go with that. Good luck. But for the normal people in the room, like, we care about deep, meaningful relationships, and there's a desire to know who you're going to spend the rest of your life with, and that's normal. That's okay. And then there's books. I mean, they are what they are. I mean, they are what they are. That's why you're here. I think that's why you're here. Not at Breakaway specifically, but I think that's why you're at A&M, is to get an education. And then when it comes to image, of course we care about how we come across. We care about first impressions or second impressions, and we care about likes and follows, and we want people to like us. I think that's a normal part of life. These are all good things. There's nothing wrong with any of these things, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying these things and valuing these things. I believe that most, if not all of these things, can actually be gifts from God. The problem comes when we value these things too much. The problem comes when we treat gifts as gods. The scripture would refer to it as worshiping the creation instead of the creator. So tonight we're going to talk about when we believe in Jesus but worship other things. Here's what I need you to hear. Please don't miss this. So all eyes on me right now. You will inevitably worship what you value most. You will. That is a reality. That is a fact of life. You will inevitably worship whatever you value most. So here's a great question for you to answer just at the beginning of our time together tonight. Who or what in this world do you value most? And if you need a little help, just answer these questions. Who or what do you get lost in thought about? Who or what in this world gets the best of your time, attention, and affection? Who or what in this world is worthy of your stress and anxiety? Who or what stirs up the affections of your soul? It's possible that that person or thing is who or what you value most. And if it's true that you will worship whatever you value most, then it's possible that that person or thing that was a gift has become your God. Colossians chapter 1, verse 16 tells us this. It says that all things have been created by Jesus and for Jesus. What that tells us is your heart has actually been created for Jesus Christ. That makes our purpose tonight very simple. It sets the aim for the evening. Here's our goal. Here's our purpose. Here's our aim. It's to allow our heart to get synced back up with the one for whom it has been created to worship. We're going to do that by zeroing in on two different characters in the Holy Scriptures. We're going to be looking at Mary of Bethany and Judas Iscariot. Fortunately for us, these two people actually show up in the same story. So if you have a Bible, turn with me tonight to John chapter 12. John chapter 12 is where we're going to be. John chapter 12, and here, let me just tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to read you John chapter 12, verses 1 through 7, and we're going to read this story, and then I'm going to immediately flip over and read Matthew 26, verses 14 through 16, because Matthew 26 happens immediately after John chapter 12, and so it's just basically one continuous story. So let me read it for us. Here's what it says. John chapter 12, verse 1. It says, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because it was a thief. And having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me." Now Matthew 26, 14 through 16. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. So let's just all get on the same page here. We're introduced to several characters. Obviously, Jesus is in the mix. He's got his 12 boys and disciples with him. Judas is included in those 12. And then we get Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. These are people that we were introduced to on the first night of the semester at the very first Breakaway. These are three people who are siblings. The text tells us in John chapter 11, the previous chapter, that Jesus loves these people. In Lazarus, the brother was actually Jesus' greatest miracle. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. It was the greatest reversal in history up to this point. Lazarus was dead, and then he was alive. That's a reversal. These are the people who are in attendance. Now, I told you that we're going to be zeroing in on Mary and Judas. What you need to know is that the hinge word in the entire story is found. It's the first word of verse 4. Look at what that one word is. It's the transitional word, but. And the reason that that word is so important is because it is striking a contrast between two things. It is contrasting how Judas responded to Jesus with how Mary responded to Jesus. And here's what it's specifically showing us. It's showing what Judas valued and what Mary valued. Now, let me just toss you a layup question. Based on what we just read, if you were tracking along in the story, whose response do you hope to identify with most? Judas's response to Jesus or Mary's response to Jesus? Like, hopefully that's not a trick question for you. Like, you don't need to think deep about it. My hope is that when I say, whose response do you hope you resonate with most, whether it's Judas or Mary, my hope is that you're saying Mary. Like, I want my response to Jesus to be like Mary's response. Hopefully no one's sitting there like, you know what, Judas just gets me. Like, he's my boy. Like, I get it. Betrayal. Makes sense. That's weird. We probably should talk afterward. But here's what you need to know. I think that as we read this story, something in us looks at how Mary responds to Jesus and says, man, that's a beautiful response. And if I'm gonna resonate with anyone, hopefully it would be Mary. But the reality is, if we want to have a response to Jesus like Mary, we first have to be honest with ourselves and identify the ways that we are already responding to Jesus like Judas. I'll just be honest with you. I can identify with Judas Iscariot a lot more than I'd ever like to admit. And so if we want to get to a place where Mary is, we first have to look ourselves in the mirror and identify the ways that we already look and respond like Judas. So here's a little background on Judas. Judas was one of the 12, which means he was handpicked by Jesus to spend every moment of every day for 3 years with Jesus. And we can kind of deduce that Judas was one of the most trusted and responsible of the 12 disciples. And the reason that we know that is because Judas was entrusted with Jesus's bank account. He was, in a sense, Jesus's financial advisor. And so when we see Judas in this story, watching Mary's response to Jesus as she anoints Jesus with very expensive ointment or perfume, we see Judas pose a question, and it would appear to be a question of fiscal responsibility. It would appear that he's just doing his financial advisory role. Look at what he asks in verse 5. He says this, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" It's just fiscal responsibility. But then we get verse 6. And in verse 6, John, the author, kind of lets us peek behind the curtain and see why Judas actually asked that question. It shows us Judas's motives. Look at what it says. It says, he said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. So this just spells it out for us. Judas was actually a thief, and he used to pilfer from the bank account of Jesus Christ. Now, right after this event in John chapter 12, we get what happens in Matthew chapter 26. And in Matthew 26, Judas asks a different question. I read it for you earlier, but look again at the question. What's the question? He says, "What will you give me if I deliver him," that's Jesus, "over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. So Judas goes to the chief priests and he asks them a question, and it's a question about money. How much is the God of the universe, Jesus Christ, worth to you guys? Now combine that question with the question back in John chapter 12, which was, why was this ointment wasted? And we know that he asked that question because he expected to skim some off the top. When you put the two stories together, what do you find out? You find out that what Judas wanted most, what Judas believed he needed most, what Judas enjoyed most, what Judas desired most was money. Money is what Judas valued most. Money was Judas's God. And so because money was Judas's God, it actually fueled his response to Jesus Christ. That is why Judas actually betrayed Jesus. He didn't betray Jesus because he hated Jesus. He didn't betray Jesus because he was trying to get back at Jesus. No, he betrayed Jesus because he valued money more than he valued Jesus. And so betrayal was actually just an act of worship from Judas toward his God of money. Now, I think it's important to note, this is just my opinion, but I really do believe that Judas valued Jesus. I do. I believe that Judas valued Jesus, and the reason that I say that with some confidence is because if he didn't value Jesus, he wouldn't have spent every day with him, leave everything, and follow him for 3 years. I think Judas valued Jesus. I just think he valued money most. He valued money more than he valued Jesus. Here's a question that I just want you to answer in the quietness of your own heart right now. At least right now, at least at this point in your life, at this point in your semester, Is there anyone or anything that you're valuing more than you're valuing Jesus? Are you valuing anyone or anything more than you're valuing Jesus? Maybe for you, maybe it is romantic love for you. Maybe you've begun to believe that the key to your happiness is companionship. So it's all about if you could just get a date, or if you could just find the one, or if you and your fiance could just get married finally, or if you and your boyfriend or you and your girlfriend could just get married, even though it's first semester of freshman year. So good luck with that. But for you, maybe romantic love has become your God. I'll just be honest with you. When I was in college, romantic love was my God. I will never forget one of my friends looking at me and just saying, "Hey, TA, I'm going to be honest with you. You just seem happier when you are in a dating relationship." I hated being single because I had begun to think that having a girlfriend or ultimately a wife was the key to fulfillment. Maybe for you, it's stuff. It could be Lululemon, but it could be a host of other things. It's all rooted in the thought that I need this to be happy. I need these joggers. I need these boots. I need this bag. I need this ridiculously priced water bottle. I need this car. I need this phone. I need this tablet. I need this computer. I need this. I need these things. I need these shoes. This is what I need, because having these things is what makes me feel secure. Having these things breeds confidence in me. Having these things makes me feel significant around my friends. Maybe for you it's food. Or not specifically food. Maybe it's something that brings momentary instant gratification, whether it's food or alcohol or porn or prescription pills or drugs. And so the way that you deal with your pain, the way that you deal with your insecurity or even your depression, is you, in a sense, eat your feelings. That's how you deal with your emotions. You lean on these things for your comfort. Maybe for you, it's achievement. So your time here at school, achievement isn't just about you attaining your dreams. It's not just the pathway to your success. No, you need achievement to avoid being a nobody in this world. Because if you don't achieve, who would you even be? Who would your parents think that you really are? Would you even matter in this world? Would you be significant in this world? Maybe for you, it's your image. It's social media. It's the stuff that you post on your phone, and you really are addicted to that little heart in the bottom tray. And seeing people interact with you and comment on your posts, and you're addicted to seeing how many likes you get according to your different posts, because it's not just about having a voice. For you, your appearance and your image is everything, because what you post declares to the world, please see me, please know me. I need to know that I matter. I need to know that I'm somebody in this world. I need to know that I measure up. I need to know that I have a life that's captivating to other people. I'm not trying to shame anyone here, but let me just ask you an honest question. Do you value one of these things more than you value that? Right now, at this point in your life, do you value one of these things more than you value that? the cross of Jesus Christ. Here's a follow-up question. What if the thing that you value most can't give you what you actually want? Have you ever thought about that? What if the thing that you value most can't actually give you what you really want? What everyone needs to realize, whether you're spiritually growing or spiritually skeptical, whether you're a follower of Jesus or you don't give a rip about Jesus, every single one of us is on the same page. We have to be on the same page, knowing that we each have souls that have deep longings for things. Every single one of us has a soul that longs for things like love, acceptance, approval, significance, value, meaning, purpose, pleasure, peace. We all want these things. We all crave these things. It's because of those hungers in our soul that Jesus said this in John chapter 6, verse 35. Look at what he said. He said, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. Do you know what he's saying? He's saying the reason that I've come is because you have been made for me. You've been made by me and for me, and I'm the one and only one who can satisfy the deepest longings of your soul. And so the reason that I ask the question, what if the thing you value most can't give you what you actually want, is because if you were to just play things out in your mind, it might begin to make sense. It might actually begin to make sense. You know what? Food, alcohol, porn, drugs, prescription pills, you know what they can do? They can distract you from your pain or your depression. But they can't eradicate it. They can just pacify it for a short period of time. When you think about stuff, like having stuff, have you ever noticed that the more you have, the more you want? Isn't that interesting? The more you have, the more you want. Who cares about the iPhone 6? The 10's coming out. The 6 is so 2000 and late. It's time for the 10. It's insatiable. You know what's interesting is that so many believe that true fulfillment will be found when you find the one and you step into marriage. And you know what the interesting thing is? It doesn't matter how good your marriage is. There will be times where you will sit there and think about being single again. Isn't that interesting? That no matter how good your marriage is, there will be rare moments where you will think, it'd be kind of fun to be single for a minute. You need to realize that anytime you look to someone or something to satisfy what only Jesus can satisfy, the end result will always be frustration and emptiness. It will. Because you're asking something to be God that is not God. And anytime you ask something to be God that is not God, you are asking it to do something that it cannot do, which is satisfy the deepest longings of your soul. So don't be surprised when in your pursuit of fulfillment, you find emptiness and frustration. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is look at Judas. Judas is our case study. He is our example. Judas got what he wanted. He got what he believed he needed. He got what he desired. He got what he valued most. And how did his life play out? He went and bought a field and committed suicide. Because in his pursuit to be full, he found emptiness. It's time to get synced up. It's time to reorder what we value. It's time for Jesus to take his rightful place back in our lives. And Mary is our example. You need to know Jesus really wants us to learn from Mary's example. This story that we read in John chapter 12 is actually also found in the book of Mark and in the book of Matthew. And so when you read Mark or Matthew, you can actually get different perspectives and some details that weren't included in John. Let me just share two details that we find in Mark. Here's what it says. Verse 6. It says, but Jesus said, this is after Mary anointed Jesus, and then Judas and the disciples freak out. He says this, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. And then in verse 9, he says this, truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. Jesus considers what Mary has done beautiful. He doesn't consider it radical. He doesn't consider it wasteful. He considers it beautiful. And interestingly, the Greek word here that's been translated beautiful can also be translated valuable. So we've been talking tonight about what we value most. But now Jesus is cluing us in on what he values. You know what he values? He values worship. He values everything and anything that flows out of you toward the thing that you value most. He values being the recipient of everything and anything that flows out of you toward him when you value him most. Jesus places such a high value on what Jesus has done that he says this. He says, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. So Jesus is basically saying, let the whole world know. If you want to know what is beautiful, this is it. What some people considered waste, Jesus considered worship. And what Mary really shows us is this. True worship of Jesus Christ elevates Jesus far above anything else in our lives. That's what true worship does. It elevates Jesus above anything else in our lives. I really want you to get the full picture of what's going on in this story. Because when Judas gets bent out of shape, what does he say? He says, why wasn't this ointment sold for 300 denarii? A denarii was equal to a day's wage. So if you think about 300 denarii, that's almost the equivalent of a year's salary. So I did some research, and the average income of a college graduate is $50,000. So let's back off of that a little because 300 denarii wasn't a full year's wage. So let's just say $45,000. Let's work with that. Let me ask you, do you own anything worth $45,000? I don't. I mean, I have a house, but I don't own my house. I pay a mortgage. The closest thing we have to $45,000 is my wife's sweet black minivan. And it's not even worth half of that. Mary brings what commentators believe was an heirloom. And people believe that the ointment, the perfume, was sealed in a flask. And so the only way to get that ointment out was to break the flask open. What that tells us is that Mary had every intention of every drop being used to bless and worship Jesus Christ. She didn't come under obligation. Nobody forced her to do this. No, she came voluntarily and joyfully, declaring Jesus Christ is far more valuable than any petty bottle of ointment or perfume. It's interesting, the Apostle Paul resonates with Mary in Philippians chapter 3, verse 8. Look at what he says. He says this. He says, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ. You see that word rubbish? It's the Greek word skubalon. You know what that word skubalon in the Greek, you know what it literally means? Get this. I'm not trying to be crass. I'm just being honest. It literally means animal excrement. And that's kind of humorous to me because here's the Apostle Paul, a person we respect, and I just see him somewhere like, man, I'm trying to figure out how to put it so people will get it. So, okay, how can I put it I've got it. Out of everything in the world, Whether it's romantic love or stuff or achievement or food, whatever. It's like dog poop in comparison to knowing Jesus Christ. Hashtag mic drop. That's the Apostle Paul. That's what he just did in Philippians chapter 3, verse 8. But do you know what Mary and Paul are saying? They're saying the same thing. They're simply saying Jesus is better. Jesus is better than romantic love. Jesus is better than porn. He's better than sex. He's better than achievement. He's better than food. He's better than alcohol. He's better than anyone or anything that I could ever come across in this world. Jesus is better. See, when I talk about worship, I need you to know I'm not talking about songs that we sing. I'm talking about lives that we live. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about lives that we live. Worship is anything and everything that flows out of you toward that which you value most. So I'm talking about a life that clearly declares to the world Jesus Christ is better. Jesus Christ is better. Jesus believes that that's the normal Christian life. That's not radical. That's not extreme. That's not just for a select few. That's the aim for anyone who would call themselves a follower of Jesus Christ, that you would live a life of worship that declares Jesus is better. Now let's just be honest. There's many of us in this room that just aren't there yet. A good majority of us probably aren't there yet. Many of us can resonate with Judas a lot more than we resonate with Mary. That's okay. But if you want to take your next step with Jesus Christ, then here's what you need to realize. Worship, please don't miss what I'm about to say. Worship is always a response to seeing. I'll say that again. Worship is always a response to seeing. Worship isn't something that you manufacture. Worship is never a ritual. Worship is never a routine. Worship is always a response to seeing Jesus for who he is and what he's accomplished for you on the cross. So just think about it. What did Mary see? Well, just a chapter earlier, just days before, Mary saw Jesus raise her brother Lazarus from the dead. You know what she witnessed? She witnessed the greatest reversal in history up to that point. Talk about a great reversal. Lazarus was dead and then he wasn't. He was dead and then he was alive. That's called a reversal. And Mary witnessed it. But you know what? Mary saw something else that none of the other disciples saw. And we find it in verse 7 of chapter 12. Look again at what it says. It says this. Jesus says, "Leave her alone. She intended to keep it for the day of my burial." Do you know what this shows? This shows intent. This shows planning. That Mary saw something that none of the other disciples saw. Mary saw that Jesus was going to the cross, so that when she's breaking up in this flask, pouring ointment on Jesus, she's actually preparing him for his death and burial. See, Jesus had tried to tell his friends and convince them that he was going to the cross, that he was going to die, but they didn't get it. But for some reason, it clicked with Mary. And part of me wonders if she could see that what Jesus did for her brother physically, he would do for her and the rest of the world spiritually by going to the cross and enduring the wrath of God for your sin and for mine. That Jesus would initiate the greatest reversal in history, where the dead could be raised to life. She saw that Jesus was going to the cross, but it's interesting that the other disciples didn't get it. They didn't see it. And just thinking about that thought that Mary saw something that the others didn't, it makes me think about the question that Jesus asked his 12 friends after he had fed 5,000 people with a few pieces of bread and a few pieces of fish. And then Jesus and his friends get in a boat, and his friends start freaking out about the fact that they don't have bread, even though Jesus just mass-produced bread. And so look at the question that Jesus asks them. In Mark chapter 8, verse 18, he says this, having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? This is an interesting thought. If worship is always a response to seeing Jesus, then what we have to realize is when there is a worship issue, there's a sight issue. A lack of worship is always due to a lack of sight. So according to Jesus, it's possible to see Jesus without actually seeing Jesus. And I wonder if that was Judas's story. I wonder if he saw Jesus without ever truly seeing Jesus. And I wonder if that's your story here tonight. I wonder if you're here tonight and you've seen Jesus because you've been around things about Jesus, but you've never truly seen Jesus. Or maybe you're here tonight and your eyes have just become so calloused that it's been a long time since you've gotten a fresh glimpse of the beauty of Jesus Christ. I wonder if some of you tonight just need to see Jesus clearly as the King of reversals. That what Jesus did for Lazarus physically, he has done for us spiritually. That he is in the business of reversals. That's what he does, is he flips things around. If you value one of these more than you value this, you need to know that you have a sight issue tonight. And so I want to tell you my prayer for us right now. I'm praying just right now what Paul prayed for his friends in Ephesians chapter 1. He said, I pray that the eyes of your heart might be enlightened. That's what I'm praying for us, that in this moment, right now, before we leave this place, that Jesus would give us eyes to see, that he would enlighten our hearts, that he would open up our eyes, that he would turn the lights on in our minds and in our hearts, because when the lights turn on, we begin to see Jesus for who he truly is and what his cross truly means. And when we see his cross for what it truly is, it changes everything. You know what we see when we see this cross? We see that this cross wasn't just Jesus' cross. When I look at this cross, I see that this cross was my cross. I see that this cross was my cross. And it's not just that this cross was my cross, it's that this cross was our cross, which means this was our punishment. The wrath of God that was poured out on Jesus as he hung on our cross was wrath towards us. But on the cross, Jesus took our porn. He took our addictions. He took our shame. He took our guilt, our insecurity, our need for approval, our impurity, our lust, our lies, our past, our abortions, our jealousy, our bitterness, and our hatred. And don't miss this, by taking it upon himself, he has taken it away from us. Do you hear what I'm saying? When Jesus took these things upon himself, he has taken it away from us. He has dealt finally and completely with our cross. Our cross, which became his cross, has now made a way for a supernatural reversal in our lives. Because our cross, which became his cross, has now made a way for our freedom. Not just my freedom, but our freedom. Jesus Christ is the King of reversals. We were dead, now we're alive. We were lost, but now we're found. We were far off, and now we've been brought near. We were enemies, now we're ambassadors. We were objects of wrath, now we're recipients of love. We failed, now we're forgiven. We don't fight for freedom, we fight from freedom. Instead of using people, we're free to love people. Instead of anger, bitterness, and resentment, the freedom of peace and forgiveness is possible. Instead of lust and porn, the freedom of love is waiting. Instead of insecurity, the freedom of value, worth, and significance in Christ are available. Instead of guilt, shame, and regret from your past, the freedom of a new start becomes your reality. Instead of having a story to hide, we have a story to tell. We were slaves, now we are children of the God of the universe. Jesus Christ is the King of reversals. So tonight, may we be people who respond with lives of worship because we have eyes to see Jesus and his cross. And as we see our cross, which became his cross, we begin to see our freedom.